Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Tonight, a very special interview. Dr. Richard Bartlett from Midland, Texas, tonight talks to us about a potential cure, that's right, a potential cure for COVID-19. You don't want to miss this incredible interview. This incredible story of hope in a world that desperately needs to hear the good news. Right now, my interview with Dr. Richard Bartlett. Welcome to The Right Side with Doug Billings. Thank you for watching on YouTube and for listening on all of the major podcast platforms across the country. Tonight, a very special interview and a special guest, Dr. Richard Bartlett from Midland, Texas. Dr. Bartlett has some astonishing and very much needed good news with regards to the treatment of COVID-19. We're excited to have him here. You've certainly, if you haven't already heard of him, you're going to be hearing a lot about and from Dr. Bartlett. Dr. Bartlett, welcome to The Right Side.
Doug, thank you for joining me and helping me get the good news out.
You're welcome, and we thank you, sir, for being with us. Doctor, why don't you begin by telling us a little bit about your background in medicine, and lead us in then to this good news that you have about the treatment for COVID-19.
Doug, I'm in West Texas, and I moved to an area that was an underserved community, medically underserved county. And I went there so that I could meet the greatest needs that we have. And there were some obstacles to care that are unique in the rural areas. And Governor Perry started a health disparities task force, and he asked me to join that task force. He appointed me to a 2-year appointment so that I could give him advice on how to make quality health care available for all Texans. After that 2-year appointment, he asked me, would you join for another year? And that continued for a total of 7 years, and a lot of good things happened as a result of that. But besides that, I've served as the president of the County Medical Society for 4 terms, practice in the emergency room, practice in the primary care setting. We're out here in the oil field, and so I'm in occupational medicine, so I'm right there on the front lines when this COVID hit. And so it was during March. I was doing a 48-hour shift in the emergency room, and at that time, you'll remember, all we heard about was COVID, only bad news. There wasn't testing available. I was worried about, well, what am I going to do if someone comes in my ER and there's dying from COVID? There's not an accepted, approved treatment. The treatment that the president had mentioned was shot down within a week by Anthony Fauci, right there in the White House, right in front of the president, making the president look bad, and wrongly so. And then in Texas, right on the heels of that, the Texas Pharmacy Board sent letters out to every pharmacy in Texas saying, do not fill a prescription for these medicines unless you have a written prescription, putting another obstacle in the way of treating people. And I was distraught. Doug, I'm a Christian. I take it to heart when someone trusts me with their life or their loved one. And so on that 48-hour shift, in between patients, I was praying. And in 48 hours, you can go to a call room between patients and take a little cat nap. And I woke up convinced that God had given me this winning strategy. And bottom line, it's working. And it's intuitive in medicine once you understand that COVID is an inflammatory respiratory disease, and the treatment, the antidote for it, is a respiratory anti-inflammatory solution, a medicine that's been available for over 20 years, super safe. It's been used on 2-pound premature babies all the way up to the fragile in the nursing homes, and it's safe on everyone. We don't worry about giving it. We don't bat an eye. It's been out for over 20 years. It's generic. That means it's cheap. Some of my patients with their insurance don't pay anything. Others, for the total course of the medicine called Budesonide, it costs like $200 out of their pocket if they pay for it cash. And that's, compare $200 for the total treatment and staying out of the hospital. The hospitals are not free, to paying for the antiviral medicine that's over $3,100 for the course and paying for the hospital stay. So you can see the savings. You can also see that we're taking the pressure off. The big concern is the hospitals will be overwhelmed. And so this helps the hospitals not be overwhelmed because it's proactive. You know, in medicine, American healthcare is the best in the world because we're proactive, because it's early detection and early treatment for cancer, for heart attack, for stroke, for other infectious diseases. But with this COVID, we're getting backwards and upside down instruction from the top of don't be proactive, don't even seek help, even if you have it, until you got severe symptoms. Wait until the house is 2/3 burned down and then call the fire department. That doesn't work for cancer, heart attack, stroke, and it doesn't work for COVID very well. If you look, the strategy of telling people if you got mild to moderate symptoms, stay home and don't even bother us in the hospital. Hospitals, I thought, were for sick people, but we're being told don't go to the hospital unless you got severe symptoms, and make sure you wear a mask, wear gloves, stay 6 feet apart. They don't even tell you to wear a face shield, even though it's been proven it can get in the eyes through the conjunctiva. What are they going to tell us next? But that strategy was what they used in China. It's not a new idea. For 20 years, we've been watching B-roll on CBS, NBC, ABC. Every time there's an epidemic in China, you see B-roll of Chinese people walking around with masks on. It didn't work in China for this pandemic. It didn't work. That strategy is the strategy for treating COVID that was used in Italy, 30,000 deaths. It didn't work there very well. They used it in France. They used it in Spain, 30,000 deaths, 30,000 deaths, and then New York by itself, 30,000 deaths. That's the treatment. That's the strategy for dealing with COVID. There's another way. And that's what the strategy was that I received back in March. And I, within a week, had patients that I started using it on, and it works. It's the strategy that they're using in South Korea, where they've had less than 300 deaths during this whole pandemic. South Korea is 50 million people, and less than 300 deaths. We were told that's not possible. You better stay afraid, be very afraid, and stick with the plan. Do what you're told. But in South Korea, they do early detection and early treatment, and their strategy involves inhaled steroids, identical to what I'm using. A different medicine, a different inhaled steroid, but the strategy is early detection and early treatment. And they have, out of 50 million, less than 300. Let's look at Taiwan, a little island floating in the ocean, 24 million people. If they tried to do in the size, the landmass is 1/3 the size of New York. New York had over 30,000 deaths, 9 million people. Look at Taiwan, 24 million people, 3 times the amount of people on 1/3 the size of the land. They're stacked on top of each other. It's more densely populated than New York. If they wanted to do social distancing, they'd be floating around, bobbing in the ocean, fighting off the sharks. It's not possible. So they must have been doing something else. They had 7 deaths so far, 7 deaths during the whole pandemic for 24 million people. That's the whole cast of Gilligan's Island. So if you think of an island, the 24 million people, only 7. That's the amount of people that can fit comfortably in a minivan going down the road. So when your listeners think about, and they see a minivan, think, oh, a whole nation of 24 million people during the whole pandemic of 6 months have only had 7 deaths. They'd all fit in a minivan.
Doctor,
what they're doing is what I'm doing.
It sounds so amazing, and it's my dad used to say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. I believe you. I've seen your other interviews and so forth. Let's spell that drug out again. I'm going to put at the end of the show here, I'm going to put up a sign with the name of it. There it is. I'm going to put up a sign also. There is the name of the drug. And doctor, tell us how this is administered. You breathe this through a machine of some sort?
Yeah, this is not something fancy, and it's not a new concoction. This medicine's been FDA approved for another inflammatory respiratory illness called asthma for over 20 years. And it's been used in the ICU for 2-pound premature babies over 20 years ago. For the last 20 years, it's been used on the most delicate American citizens, from the youngest to the oldest, without batting an eye. But the difference is CoVid is a respiratory inflammatory disease times 100 compared to asthma. And so you have to often use a higher dose and use it more frequently initially. And so that's the difference. And that's what's going to be in the books later as far as standard of care. Okay. But that's what they're doing in Japan. 121 million people and less than 1,000 deaths. 121 million people and less than 1,000 deaths during the whole pandemic. 121 million people versus 9 million people in New York with 30,000 deaths plus. There's a different strategy that's being used. And it's different than what China promoted and the World Health Organization lauded and was praising. And that was repeated by the World Health Organization as our strategy, and then repeated, and then the CDC repeated what the World Health Organization said. We got a better plan, and it's working. It's working in other nations. It's working with my patients. I know of other providers that are doing this as well. 100% of my patients are alive. 0 of my patients are dead. Over 30,000 are dead in New York under Governor Cuomo's plan of the current strategy. There's another way. And so I'm excited with this good news, and I want to put it out there. I'm not going to make any money off of this. No one will. Big Pharma will not. It's generic. It's very inexpensive.
That's a good point. Yeah. And look, we are so desperate for this good news, Dr. Bartlett. We're thankful for this. We're grateful that you received this idea after prayer. And I think that also needs to be said and brought up. Too often, I think in today's United States, thankfully it's the minority that tries to shut this kind of news out. But I believe that through good people like you, good people of faith, good people of science, that we're going to get the good news out, and it certainly is much needed. And it's impressive to know that, those countries that you mentioned, ironically or not, I don't know, the Asian countries of Singapore, Taiwan, Japan, with multiple millions of people who have been using this protocol of which you're talking about, have had such significantly less deaths. Now, that is some good news, and we've got to begin to convince the science community and the folks who are in the United States that are the influencers in this arena. We've got to begin to convince them of these kinds of things, don't you think?
Doug, what you're talking about is outcomes. There's a term, and we look at science and we look at outcomes, and we talk about evidence-based medicine. Evidence-based medicine. Look at the evidence of the treatment strategy that they started in China, and compare that to the evidence-based medicine outcomes of Japan and Singapore and Iceland. Iceland is not, it's got 10 deaths so far. 10 people have died in Iceland during the whole pandemic. I'm just saying there's a better way. There's good news. And budesonide has been out for over 20 years. When I started doing research on the science journals, a plethora of solid information from over 51 journals immediately found supporting budesonide as a treatment strategy for this, because it blocks the cytokines, the inflammatory chemicals that are released with COVID. Here's the problem with COVID. You have a respiratory viral illness. It binds to the ACE receptors in the lungs, and then it triggers the release of chemicals that go in the bloodstream, total body. And what's killing people with COVID especially is the multi-organ failure of the kidneys, a heart attack, stroke, clots in the lungs, complications from the inflammation. And so you can, just like shooting a fire extinguisher at the base of the fire all the fiery flames of inflammation go out when you deal with it at the source. And that's what we're doing, and it's working.
Excellent, doctor. Listen, I just can't thank you enough for the good news. I know that you're gonna be in demand. If people that are watching and listening to this haven't heard of Dr. Richard Bartlett yet, you soon will be. This is incredible news. Apparently a cure, a reasonably good treatment, and as I say, evidence of the obvious is sufficient. Look at his results. Look at the evidence based on his treatment of his patients. 100% people in his
100% alive.
Alive.
And let me tell you, Doug, the secret is out. The NIH is studying budesonide against COVID right now.
Okay.
Their study won't be over till October.
Yeah, that's too late. Right?
The country of France is studying inhaled budesonide against COVID. The University of Oxford announced that they're going to study inhaled budesonide against COVID. The country of Spain has announced they're going to study inhaled budesonide against COVID. So it's not just a little thought in the middle of nowhere, Texas. This is being studied by Oxford, by the NIH. But the important thing is early treatment. And with our testing that we have right now, it's better than no testing, but we have up to 40% false negatives with this test. And that means if someone has the symptoms right now during a pandemic of fever, shortness of breath, chest pain, chest tightness, severe fatigue, diarrhea, classic symptoms of COVID, they should be treated empirically, proactively. Don't wait until they are a breath away from death and then start treatment. The problem with the NIH study that they've set up with budesonide against COVID is to get in their study, you have to already have documented pneumonia and be in the ICU. That sounds like a terrible strategy to wait until someone's a breath away from death and then see if something can work. How about we just don't let anybody die and we treat them early with something that's effective? And I'm telling you, I'll give you an example. I got a call last night from a gentleman whose little brother died with no health problems, 32 years old, last Monday. And he and his two other brothers have lots of health problems. The little brother that died had no comorbidities. But these three brothers are older, and now they're all extremely sick. And of course, they're mourning their brother's death, and now they're terrified what's going to happen with them. If that happened to their athletic young brother, what's going to happen to them? And now their children are testing positive, and their parents are testing positive. I started the treatment, and overnight in the morning, one of the brothers told me on the phone, "I cannot believe how good I feel today." And it's a mixed joy and sorrow, because he's thinking, what could have happened with my brother that passed away if he would have been offered this? But all the 7 that are in the family now that are positive are recovering quickly. And so that's what I'm seeing with early treatment with an effective medicine, budesonide. It's like a silver bullet for this disease. It was like it was made for COVID. It works great for asthma, but it is amazing for COVID. And there's been 243 mutations already of COVID. An Iceland study showed that. That's parallel to HIV. And they've been trying to make Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx have both been involved in trying to make an HIV vaccine, and they've been failing for 40 years. What makes them think that we're going to believe them that they're going to be able to make a vaccine against a rapidly mutating virus parallel to HIV in record time? And I hope they don't skip all the safety steps.
Agreed. Well, we're going to help get the word out. We're almost out of time for this edition. I'm going to put up a slide at the end of the interview here with the name of the drug. The American people need to be made aware of this. If you have loved ones who are medically fragile, who are in the group of people that are of high concern, you need to take this doctor's advice, Dr. Richard Bartlett's advice, and get this medication. Look into it. Always, of course, get your family doctor involved, and make sure that you heed this very good news. Very good news. Dr. Bartlett, I can't thank you enough for getting this message out and coming to be with us here on the right side. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Doug. It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for sharing the good news.
Absolutely, sir. God bless you and your family, and God bless Texas. We'll see you. Thank you, sir.
Amen. Thank you.
Amen. All right. Well, there it is. The message of hope. Budesonide. Remember that name, Budesonide. Get with your family doctor. It's a very readily available drug used to treat asthma, and in this case, every indication is that it can cure and treat COVID-19. We appreciate people like Dr. Richard Bartlett, who, through the work of science and the heart of faith, receive ideas, try new things, and find solutions. Let's have each other's back out there, America. Let's walk each other off this ledge of wildly unnecessary panic and begin to seek out this treatment, this cure, in this time. Thank you for watching The Right Side. I'm Doug Billings. Have a good night.